Welcome to this webinar with Keith Kavanaghs. We will start with today's lesson and the short version. 1 minute. Love holds no grievances. Let me not betray myself. I would wake to myself by laying all my grievances aside and awakening in him. Welcome. We have an hour together with Keith Kavanaghs. And welcome, Keith. I will put you and me into spotlight. And there we go. There we go. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me with you today.
Yeah, we have never met before, you and I.
No, first time.
First time, but I've heard a lot about you. We have members in our group who are listening to you and following you, and I'm so curious. What I've heard is that you are so clear in your message.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So could you tell us a little bit more about how you received the course and
Yeah, I first heard of it nearly 30 years ago when I heard Wayne Dyer speaking about it. And he quoted a lovely passage from the course. It was, if you knew who walked with you all the days of your life, you could never know fear again. And I just thought that was beautiful. So I had to go out and get my hands on that book. And it was beautiful and impenetrable. But even though it was very hard to know what was being said in a lot of the book, there were some absolutely standout, beautiful passages, which were breathtaking and moving deeply. Um, and I was a sort of a casual student of the course for many decades, and played around with other spiritual modalities and various different things. However, there was a point in my life where I had a sudden onset of a generalized anxiety disorder, which was dreadful. It was with me from the minute I got up in the morning until the minute I slept at nighttime. Anyone who has anxiety knows how awful it is. And this was just generalized anxiety that was there constantly. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't meditate. It was hard to sleep. It was it was dreadful. And after about 8 years, of no spiritual development, which was always the great passion of my life, I reached a point of saying, this isn't enough. It's a half life, and I'm going to throw myself into this 100%. And that was about 4 years ago. And I did throw myself into it 100%. And the anxiety disorder was gone after 4 months. And I started having awakening experiences, which I didn't understand very well at the time, but I subsequently have made sense of that. Um, and then I was just from posting in groups, I was asked to give some talks, which I did. And that just resulted in more requests for more teachings. And I sort of went into teaching, kicking and screaming, going, I'm not going to do that. And that's all I'm going to do. But it has ballooned and it's become what it is today.
that's wonderful. And you have a Facebook group where people are very, very active and
Yeah.
sharing a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I set up the Facebook group, the intention was that this was going to be a safe place because when you go onto a lot of the Facebook groups on Facebook, they really don't operate under the principles of A Course in Miracles in the slightest. It's just one faction hating another and wanting to be right by making the other faction wrong. And I wasn't going to have a group full of spiritual warriors. There's enough of those on the internet where people argue over who's right and who's wrong. And so from the very beginning, there was just going to be zero tolerance for any of that, which I thought would have been harder to police, but it's people just love it and they respect it. And yeah, they toe the line and everyone just feels safe there.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And today you are going to talk about the miracle and
I am. Yeah, the
the
miracle.
spirit.
Mm.
So,
When I began doing the course in earnest, it wasn't even um, a concerted effort with the workbook or anything like that. I had been listening to Ken Wapnick lectures a lot just to get my head around what the course was saying and understand everything. And Ken was just exceptional in terms of his mind and how he decoded something as impenetrable as A Course in Miracles before anyone else, and became the seminal authority on it. But anyway, he just had this very simple practice that he recommended, which was being in the cinema with Jesus. And it's based on the principle that we have a split mind. It's split between the ego and the Holy Spirit. And what it means in real terms is that as consciousness, we are both wrong-minded and right-minded simultaneously. So the Holy Spirit's always there, shining in the mind, and the ego's always there, and they're dissociated. So you cannot identify as both, and you cannot identify as neither. It's one or the other. And so Ken talked about this process of being in the theater or being in the cinema with Jesus. And the idea was that you watch life and you watch the thoughts and feelings that are happening in yourself with no judgment. So there was this practice of knowing yourself to be with Jesus outside of time and space, watching a movie of time and space and thoughts and feelings that were happening. And so looking back, the anxiety was an incredible blessing because it was there constantly. And being an ego wasn't all that great. It was a bit of a nightmare. And so really, I would just spend my whole day going, yes, there's anxiety going on in my wrong mind, but what does that have to do with the me that's watching this with Jesus? Um, and in the beginning, that felt somewhat of a leap of faith. Um, the idea that there's a me that can watch thoughts and feelings without being affected by them was somewhat neutral of an experience. Angel Gabriel didn't come down and blow his horn, and the 1812th symphony didn't start up with cannon fire, and scores of angels didn't come down out of heaven singing the Alleluia chorus. It was quite neutral. The idea of there being a part of my mind that can watch thoughts and feelings happening but not be affected by them. But as I did the practice for the first 2 months, and I was doing this constantly, it has to be said. After 2 months, I just felt there was a peace back in my mind that hadn't been there for 8 years. There was still anxiety happening, but there was a peace in the background where before there was just a static of noise and doom and fear and anxiety. And after 4 months, I started to have experiences where I was the peace and I wasn't Keith. um, and and at that point, I realized that. So I guess what started off as quite a neutral experience in terms of this self that can be aware of thoughts and feelings without being bound by them or colored by them or affected by them or in any way qualified by them. What started off as neutral started to glow. It started to shine. in my mind, and it took over as what was real. Um, and like I say, there were times where I just slipped from identifying with a story because there's nothing to a separate self identity other than a story about no one. Separateness is just created with thoughts, but it doesn't actually exist. Um, and identity is just intrinsically bound up in thoughts. If there are no thoughts or if they're not believed, there is no identity there. And what you are is the one that sees that. And so I started to have those experiences. And that sort of really, it meant I could understand the workbook lessons in a completely new way. And it meant that I could understand the forgiveness process in a completely new way. So if we were to talk about what forgiveness is, I think today's lesson actually would be a really good place to start. So let's just go back to lesson 68 today. Love holds no grievances. I would wake to myself by laying all my grievances aside and waking in him. So I would wake to myself, capital S self, because I don't know what I am when I hold grievances. But by laying all my grievances aside, I awaken in him the truth of everyone behind thoughts. So A Course in Miracles is a rescue mission because none of us know what we are. We all think we're an ego. We think we're a separate self. We think we're a self we've made. That is not the Son of God. And nothing it thinks or says means anything. It is neither bad nor good. It is unreal and nothing more than that. Lesson 93. And so the miracle process that Jesus teaches in the Course, it is a formula for breaking the spell of mindlessness. Mindlessness is when I think I'm a body with a story, a separate self, a self made out of thoughts. And the miracle is the process of flipping out of a false identity into an identity that's non-conceptual, into an identity which could be described as awareness, a non-judgmental presence. In the Course, Jesus tells us, I've told you not to judge, but I'm not taking the right away from you. He's saying you cannot judge because the truth of what we are can't judge. And so if I have judgments about things, that just means I don't know what I am because I'm not capable of judgment. So A Course in Miracles is a rescue mission because you don't know what you are. And you think you can be sick, and you think you can be in pain, and you think you can be separate, and you think you can die, and it's all lies. It's all just thoughts that aren't true. Um, and so the miracle formula is our daily means of noticing when we're mindless, because suffering will happen, discomfort will arise, and that means you're ego identified because you can't suffer. Jesus says, "What suffers is not part of me. What is in pain is but illusion in my mind." A self, so there's thoughts happening, and then there's the thought that I am the thinker of that thought. And so the thinker of thoughts is just another thought. And so what we think we are is just a thought. It's not true. And you can experience what you are outside of thoughts with forgiveness. So let's just take another passage from the Course. And I love this explanation of forgiveness. The Holy Spirit. Now, the Holy Spirit was the part of the mind from the very beginning that looked on the separation and did nothing because it was nothing. The Holy Spirit was the original non-judgmental witness to an apparent separation and did nothing with it because it's nothing and it's not real. So the Holy Spirit asks you but this: bring to him every secret you have locked away from him. Open every door to him and bid him enter the darkness and lighten it away. At your request, he enters gladly. He brings the light to darkness if you make the darkness open to him. But what you hide, he cannot look upon. He sees for you. And unless you look with him, he cannot see. The vision of Christ is not for him alone, but for him with you. Bring therefore all your dark and secret thoughts to him and look upon them with him. He holds the light and you the darkness. They cannot coexist when both of you together look on them. His judgment must prevail, and he will give it to you as you join your perception to his. So, what that's saying very simply is the way out of the hell of identifying with an illusion of yourself is that you look on your thoughts and feelings with no judgment. That's how you join your perception to the Holy Spirit. You look at what your ego is doing and you do nothing. Because if I'm stuck in ego and believing I'm suffering and murderous and hating everyone and hating myself, I'm stuck in a false identity and there's no way out. As Jesus says, it's foolproof. It's not God-proof. But it is foolproof because anything I try to do to fix the situation is ego. It's mind, ego mind. It's the separate self trying to fix separateness. But separateness can't be fixed because it is synonymous with suffering and pain. And so what we need is a way to exit from the mind that will always suffer, that loves suffering, that's addicted to suffering, that will seek out suffering in every circumstance. And we need a way to escape out of that identity. I need a way to know what I am that's not this imagined separate self-identity. And all I have to do is nothing. Because I say it's flypaper. Students, when they find themselves feeling in pain and murderous and upset, they go into flypaper mode, which just sticks them further into ego. And it's, oh my God, this shouldn't be happening to me. I'm failing the course. I'm a bad course student. What do I do? What's my course process? What's my forgiveness formula? How do I fight the darkness? How do I go back to the light? And all of that will just stick you further into ego. So it will not work. And so the first thing we have to do to escape out of the ego mind is nothing. You have to stop. And we have to allow what the ego is doing. We have to not judge it. Forgiveness always comes down to forgiving yourself for choosing to be something you're not, an ego, a separate self, a body with a story. That's the only thing we're ever forgiving. We're not forgiving anyone else because everything is working together for good. Everything's working together for good. And only ego thinks otherwise. All things work together for good, except in the ego's judgment. And so when I think everything is not working together for good, I think I'm an ego. I think I'm a separate self. I think I'm an illusion of myself. And I need a way out. And so Jesus says, now you are being shown you can escape from all suffering, from all pain. And he says, all that's required is you look on the problem the way it is and not the way you've set it up. And the only problem is that you're choosing to identify as a body with a story, a separate self. That's the only problem you have. Any other problem you think you have is not a problem. It's a symptom of the one problem you have, which is that you don't know what you are. You're misidentified as this lacking, needing, wanting, self-hating mess. And the way out is simple. You look at the fact that you're choosing to be an ego and you don't judge it. And so the only skill set you need for forgiveness is learning to look at yourself choosing to be an ego without hating yourself for it. Because we know we're choosing to be egos constantly. And the problem is we absolutely despise ourselves for it. We hate ourselves for it. And that guilt all gets stored up. So we find ways of punishing ourselves for what we're doing. And instead, we're learning a process of looking at the fact that I am choosing to identify as an ego and completely forgiving it. No judgment. complete non-resistance to it, non-interference. I'm doing nothing except looking without judgment. And forgiveness is looking at the ego without judgment. That's all it is. And once I do that, there's a softness rises in my mind. There is a presence. There is an awareness of thoughts and feelings happening. It's a felt sense of being. It's an identity behind thoughts. And it's just a presence. It's not thinking. It doesn't have thoughts about thoughts. It doesn't have thoughts about feelings. It is just a witness. And that's our identity in the Holy Spirit. And so by simply looking at the fact that I have chosen to identify with a story of me, an ego, with no judgment of myself, the presence that we all are is restored to my mind. Again, it's a softness, it's a space around the thoughts and feelings. It's a non-judgmental presence, a witness. And that is restored to me. The exit door opens from hell, and nothing will open the exit door from hell of separate identity, of ego identity, of suffering, other than forgiveness, looking without judgment. And the minute you look on the decision to be an ego without judging yourself for it, what you are, as what doesn't judge, non-judgmental awareness, is restored to you. And so Jesus says in the quote, you know, the two interpretations cannot coexist when you join your perception to his, the Holy Spirit. You know, Jesus anthropomorphizes the Holy Spirit in A Course in Miracles. The Holy Spirit is just what is true of everyone. God's one holy Son. In the Course, Jesus says the ego is legion, but the Holy Spirit is one. And so if I'm identified as a separate self, and only from the perspective of a separate self, are there 8 billion separate selves? But if I reject that identity as a separate self and feel myself as this presence in the Holy Spirit, that's the truth of everyone. That's where we're one, God's one holy innocent Son. And the ego doesn't really exist. And so when I And so all that's asked in A Course in Miracles is that when your suffering arises and you want to blame someone for doing it to you, the problem is not what's happening to a separate self. The problem is not what's happening to a body. The problem is you think you are a separate self. You think you are a body, but you're not. And you have to remember what you are. And forgiveness is the process that breaks the mindlessness. It breaks the trance of the separate self. It allows you to exit from the story of me, suffering me, victimized me. You get to exit from it. And all you have to do is look at the fact that you're choosing to identify with that story with no judgment, non-resistance, do nothing, or it's flypaper. You forgive what you're doing. And the truth of what you are as this presence, what we all are as this presence, is restored to you. And the darkness cannot stand. All suffering arises on behalf of a non-existent separate self, a story of what you are that isn't you. And when you let go of the story to be this identity in the Holy Spirit, the darkness cannot stand. There is no longer a separate self-identity there on whose behalf suffering can stand. So I guess that's my explanation of the miracle and forgiveness. It's a means of exiting false identity.
That's where the shift happens.
That's where the shift happens. And the only way it can happen is if I look at the activity of the ego mind without judging it.
Mm.
And I know the only problem, Jesus says there's one problem and there's one solution to every problem because it's all the same problem. You think you're separate. You think you're a thing that can suffer. The only problem you ever have is that you think there can be a problem because there's no problems. There's only one problem, which is that you don't know what you are. You think you are an illusion of yourself. You think you're an ego, and that is experienced as limitation and lack and pain and suffering. And that is then split off and denied and projected out onto the world. So I can say, you did this to me. I was a perfectly happy ego. Everything was fabulous. You came along, you did that, you said that, and you ruined it. Look what you've done to me. Look at the emotions that are present in me. But there's no cause in the world. The world doesn't cause us to feel anything. It doesn't, can't make us happy, and it can't make us unhappy. That is purely down to something we're doing with our mind, which teacher we've chosen, which means, am I choosing the teacher of separateness and individuality and guilt and pain and lack? Or am I choosing the teacher of sameness, the presence, that's the truth of everyone in behind their lying thoughts of what they are? Yeah.
So after 4 months, you did the shift, you could say.
Yeah, like I say, for 2 months, I didn't make the connection. I just thought, well, there's this peace in my mind and it's beautiful. And I was just incredibly thankful. And I was like, well, that's the Holy Spirit in my mind, and that's great. Um, but it wasn't really until maybe about 4 months' time that I actually felt a shift in identity, in the sense that I understood that that peace is the truth of what I am. And what I thought I was this peace apparently mixed up with thoughts and feelings and stories about what I am. And so what I realized is I am the only thing I ever am is this presence. And and the experience will just be I am this presence knowing the truth of itself and seeing it as the truth of everyone, or I am this presence apparently mixed up with stories and thoughts and limitation and lack, and don't know what I am. That's just ego. But at any given time, I can use forgiveness. I can use the miracle to separate what this presence out from what it's identified with, thoughts and feelings and stories. Um, and all I have to do is look at the fact that I'm identifying with thoughts and feelings and stories without judging myself for it. And the softness is restored to me. This presence is restored to me. Again, the exit door opens from hell. Now I haven't, because, you know, up until this, there was no choice available to me. There was no option available to me. I was stuck in hell. And then you see, as an illusion of myself, I will go, let me now try and choose the Holy Spirit. Let me, the separate self, the ego, let me choose the Holy Spirit. And there's no Holy Spirit available to the ego. It's one or the other. So the course and that's where loads of people go wrong in A Course in Miracles. And then they say the course doesn't work. Or they end up a spiritualized ego going, I have awoken. Behold my holiness, my separate self. Um, so the big thing to realize is that we have to let go of the ego's hand to know what we are in the Holy Spirit, because it's one or the other, but it can't be both. So I can't be Keith, the lacking, needing, suffering body with a story, and go, Holy Spirit, come into my mind and fix it for me and help me in the world, and nonsense. I first of all have to let go of my misidentification as Keith in order that I know the Holy Spirit in my mind and this alternative identity I have in the Holy Spirit. But I cannot know that until I look at the problem the way it is. The problem is not what's happening to Keith. The problem is not um, anything in the world. The problem is I'm choosing to identify with Keith, and Keith is just a story. It's just a self-made out of thoughts that doesn't really exist. And and what am I? I'm the one that can see that if I can forgive the decision for it. And so the only thing that restores a decision to me, that shows me I'm a decision maker mind, the only thing that makes the alternative available to me, because ego is a closed system, um, What wants to fix the ego is ego. What wants to fight the ego is ego. What wants to get rid of the ego is ego. What wants to be a happier ego is ego. The only thing that restores this non-conceptual identity to me is forgiving the only problem there is, which is that I'm choosing to be a story. And if I do that, what's looking at the story without judgment? It's not a story. And it's not separate. And it's not a self that's made out of thoughts. And that's the identity we all have in the Holy Spirit. And that's what Jesus means when he says, if I don't judge, I can awaken in him. I can realize, no, I'm not a separate self. I'm not a self made out of stories. I don't have a past or a future. That's just a story about no one. I am what is here now in this moment, not judging, a pure presence. And I think the really interesting thing is that there is nothing at all to the ego, the separate self identity, other than resistance to the present moment. There is nothing, it's not that the ego resists the present moment. There is nothing else to the ego except arguing with the present moment. Um, and so the really interesting thing with the forgiveness formula, with the miracle is, if I allow the present moment to be what it is, including all the ego's drama and the stories and the thoughts, and if I allow the present moment to be what it is, ego dissolves. There is no ego there. And there's just the presence that you are. Yes, there's still some ego patterns happening, like thoughts and feelings and whatever. And that's perfectly okay because it's not happening to anyone. You're the one who sees this. So there's just this ego stuff that's coming up to heal. And my identity is the one that's allowing it there to be there to heal. But but I'm not a separate self that's claiming victimhood and claiming suffering and claiming upset. And that's not there anymore. I am this non-judgmental presence of the ego stuff that's coming up to clear. Ken Wapnick would always say the right mind is a non-judgmental awareness of the wrong mind. And so you right-mindedness is looking at what's happening in the wrong mind without judgment. But that's a shift of identity. I no longer am identifying as the thinker of thoughts and the feeler of feelings. Instead, I am the non-judgmental awareness of thoughts and feelings happening without claiming them as mine. I can feel my okayness as this presence in the Holy Spirit, even as the ego's fear and hatred and upset and whatever else has to come up to heal. I can feel my okayness as the presence I am in the Holy Spirit so that it can heal in the okayness.
Wonderful. Just one question before we
Yeah.
open up for participants to ask their questions. How is it to live in that okayness in your everyday life?
Yeah. Now, I'm no ascended guru.
Really?
um, and so for me in my life, I think the important thing is that there was a fundamental shift of identity. So I know that Keith is just a story about no one. And that this presence that is the truth of me is the truth of everyone. Now, that does not mean as I go about my day, I will not dissociate the presence that I am, rise as an imaginary separate self, on whose behalf affront can happen, on whose behalf upset can happen. So that does still happen for me. And so even though I had what you would call an awakening, it's not an abiding awakening. Ego didn't vanish. Um, and so really my day is pendulum swings. So I'll get up in the morning and thoughts will be, and I'll go, aha, is that me? Or am I the one that's aware of those thoughts being there? And that puts me into my right frame of mind there. I know what I am. I'm not lost in a thought identity. And the thoughts all quieten down. And then as I go about my day, something will happen. Some kind of irritation or discomfort or impatience or, something like that will occur. And the minute it does, I go, oh, I was insane. I thought I was a story there for a minute. Can I completely allow this pain to be here because it's the pain of ego. It's not my pain, it's the ego's pain. But can I completely allow it to be here? Can I not judge it? Can I offer no resistance to this pain? But can I drop all the stories about why it's there? Because the stories are all lies. Because this is the hatred that's in the ego. This is the ego's hatred. This is the ego's fear. This is the ego's inadequacy. And can I give it permission to be here? Can I offer no resistance to it? Can I allow it? Can I not interfere? And in that process, I am restored to the presence that is the truth of who I am. And for most things, I would say 95, I mean, this wasn't always that high. 95% of the time, whatever's coming up to heal will just vanish. Again, as Jesus says, when you join your perception to his. So when I let go of identifying as a story and I know myself that this presence is the truth of who I am, then the darkness just can't stand because there's no more imaginary separate self that it can stick to. Um, but there is some stuff that will come up that will take longer. And again, all I have to do is know my identity as this presence, to notice the noticer, to be aware of the awareness that I am, as whatever darkness comes up is allowed to be there without stories, which are all lies. It's allowed to be there so that it can heal however long that takes. I always say to people, when that ego's darkness comes up to heal, you drop the stories, drop the projections because they're all lies, um, and you must give it permission to be there, even if it's there forever,
Right.
because that's how you drop all resistance to it, and that's how you feel your okayness. Now, the irony is, if you can genuinely give yourself permission that fear can be here, even if it's here for the rest of my life, if you can genuinely do that, it'll vanish straight away. Rarely we have that kind of genuine, but in terms of the more patient you can be with the process, the quicker it ends. And the more impatient and sort of like trying to push and resist, it'll take longer.
Yeah.
It'll work either way. But it's like Jesus says in the Course, now you must learn that only infinite patience produces immediate effects. And it does. But again, we can't apply that formula so it goes quicker because that's not infinite patience. So we have to really mean it. And so if fear is coming up, I have to be ready to, can I be okay, feel my okayness as this fear is here, even if it's here forever? That's the right mindset. Yeah,
Yeah. I can feel it.
very good.
Thank you. So let's open it up. So if you have a question or something to reflect upon, use your digital hand or wave your hand. I will scroll through and see if I see any hands waving.
Nobody understood the Irish accent.
They do. Marie, go ahead. I will put you in.
Hello, Keith and everyone.
Hello, Marie.
Hi, Keith. Um, Thank you so much. And uh, we have a lot of methods that we use, means that we use in our group
Mhm.
with Anna.
Yeah,
And I do a lot the work of Byron Katie.
wonderful. It's a wonderful addition to A Course in Miracles. It's completely compatible. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So then now you answered my question already. Yeah, because what I could hear from you is that to allow those feelings coming up,
Mhm.
because I can allow it, And then I can hear the stories.
Yes.
I can hear the lies.
Yes.
But I don't need to, I see the stories, I see the thoughts, and I see them, I can let them go. And the main thing, what I understand, is to allow this uh, uncomfortable feeling that's going on
Yes. You
within.
must. You must.
That's the thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, because the emotions that are coming up and the feelings that are coming up, they're not a problem. Resistance to them is the problem. The attempt to push them back down, the attempt to disown them and push them away, that's the problem. Because all that happens is, because it's all the same guilt, right? It's all the same primordial guilt that's there from the very beginning. And it's just, it gets pushed down and then it just waits for the next situation or circumstance where it can vomit itself out and go, you did this to me, behold my victimhood. And then if we don't allow it, if it's not allowed to heal in the presence we are in the Holy Spirit, all it does is it'll seem like it gets better. We get over it, but the emotion didn't heal. It just gets pushed back down again, waiting for the next time that it's going to explode. And so instead, when we give the emotions permission to be there, that's how we heal them. So again, Jesus says in the Course, the Holy Spirit asks but this of you. So nothing but this of you. Bring to him every dark and secret thought that you have. All you have to do is look at what's going on in the ego without judgment. And so if we can drop the projections, in other words, the problem is not what's happening to Marie. The problem is you are identifying as Marie. And so you look on that without judgment and you feel what you are that's not Marie. That's not a story. That's not a self made out of stories, this presence. And then whatever is coming up, whether it's the fear of the ego, the anger of the ego, the upset of the ego, all you want to do is be really curious about it. The first thing you want to do is thank the world because you go, I didn't know this was here. There's still anger in me. Didn't know that before. That was in my unconscious mind. I didn't know that until this situation happened and I vomited responsibility out onto the person that assaulted me. I didn't know the anger was here. Brilliant. Now, can I allow it to be here so it can heal in my allowing of it? So it can heal in the okayness that I know that I am. So again, emotions coming up, that has to happen. All the guilt in our mind has got to surface. And the minute you have a genuine awakening to the truth of what we are in the Holy Spirit as a presence outside of thoughts, the minute that happens, that's the cork popped on every unresolved trauma, regret, inadequacy, and fear that you've ever had. Now it all has to rise up to the surface to be healed in what you know yourself to be in the Holy Spirit. So we welcome whatever ego emotions are coming up, that they can be undone for all eternity. Because each time you go through this forgiveness process and you allow the emotion without the stories, look what was inside me. The world didn't do it to me. It was already there. Look what was inside me. Can I allow this to be here? Can I forgive it being here? And I allow it to be there for as long as it takes for it to be undone. And now it's gone forever. That same guilt will never again wait and explode onto a new situation. It's gone forever once it's done. But our instinct as egos is constantly to push it down, to push it away, to deny it, to minimize it, to blame it. And that's what we're shifting with our forgiveness process. Does that make sense, Marie?
Yeah, thank you. And also what I'm noticing also is like there is this thing of trying to push it down. It's like a
Yeah.
feeling. It's like
Yeah.
it's also a feeling. trying
Yeah.
to push it down.
Yeah.
So I have to allow that feeling to come up as well for the other things to come up as well.
Yeah. 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 Always, it's just being in non-resistance to what's happening. And that will always have you fall back into the truth of what you are in the Holy Spirit. The minute we're in resistance to anything, or the minute we're trying to fight something or fix something or change something, that's us in the flypaper again. We're just getting further embroiled in an ego identity that's not us. And so, as Jesus says in the Course, I need do nothing. And he said, if you can understand this, it'll save you centuries of effort. Do nothing. Just look without judgment. And you feel the truth of what you are in the Holy Spirit. And then allow whatever needs to heal to come up to be healed. And so if there's resistance to it, really all we have to do with resistance is inevitable, but all we have to do with resistance is notice it without judgment. And then the one that's doing that isn't resisting. So if we give resistance permission to be there, if we allow it to be there, if we don't fight it, if we don't feel guilty about it, if we don't hate ourselves for it, if we just allow it and just look at it as a curiosity with no judgment, it alters your identity. Now you're no longer this imaginary thing that's in resistance. You have fallen back into a different position where there's no resistance. So yes, with resistance, you definitely don't want to fall into the trap of trying to fix resistance or judging resistance. All you have to do is forgive it being there. And in that feeling of forgiveness, the one who's forgiving, the one who's looking without judgment at the resistance, isn't resisting. So forgiveness will always help you fall back out of identification with the ego. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I found the key word, curiosity.
Yeah, really
To
powerful. Yeah, really powerful. Just go, oh, I didn't know this hatred was here still. Can I allow it? Can I welcome it being here? Can I offer no resistance to it being here? I have to do that to experience the truth of what I am, because it's only in non-judgment that I can know the truth of what I am in the Holy Spirit. Like today's quote in the lesson. And so it's always just avoiding a judgment. And so again, yes, thoughts are always lies. Um, Anything you think you are is a lie. Jesus says, salvation can be seen as nothing more than the escape from concepts. So every concept you hold of what you are is a lie, and the truth of you is something that no concept can describe. So thoughts are always lies, and so as soon as we can, we want to try and understand that the voice in your head is not you. So, there's an insane voice talking to itself in everyone's mind. That's not you. That's the false identification. That's the false self. And so, as Jesus says in lesson 93, nothing it thinks or does means anything. It is unreal and nothing more than that. Or to put it another way, in lesson 52, he says, I have no private thoughts, yet it is only private thoughts of which I am aware. What can these thoughts mean? They do not exist, and so they mean nothing. Yet my mind is part of creation and part of its creator. Would I not rather join the thinking of the universe than to obscure all that is really mine with my pitiful and meaningless private thoughts? So all the thoughts of a separate self mean absolutely nothing. Nada. Zip. All the opinions we cherish, all the opinions we shove down everyone's throat, and very important that everyone should come on board with my opinion. And Jesus is going, they mean nothing. They don't exist. They're an illusion. You're not that. Um, and so as soon as we can, we want to understand that the voice in our head is a liar. It's an imposter that pretends to be you. And again, forgiveness is what frees you from your predicament of thinking it's what you are. I am not thoughts and feelings. I am the awareness and behind them in the Holy Spirit. I am this presence in the Holy Spirit. And that's the awakening that forgiveness does for us. And that's only the beginning. Now we have to allow all the hatred and the fear and the pain, all that has to come up to heal as I make my stand, knowing myself to be this awareness in the Holy Spirit, as I feel my okayness as this witness in the Holy Spirit, if you like, in the cinema with Jesus, which is this, it's this experience that metaphor was pointing to. And so, like I say, knowing I'm not the insane voice talking to itself in my mind, that's the first step. That's an awakening. And then the real work starts. All the darkness has to rise that it be freed in the presence of what I really am. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah. I don't have anything else to do.
I need do nothing.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Let's see. So if anyone have a question and need translation, I'm happy to translate. So you can ask your question in Swedish and I can translate between the languages. It feels really good when you say that I am not the voice of the ego. I'm not the insane voice speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But all the insane voice talking to itself in our mind is perceptions bouncing around and ricocheting in the mind. And then there is a thought that I am the thinker of those thoughts, but there's no thinker of those thoughts. They're just the ego's thoughts, and they're not happening to anyone, and nobody's thinking them, and they don't belong to anyone, and they don't mean anything. Jesus just said they mean nothing. They're not anyone's thoughts. And the only problem Jesus says there's one problem and one solution to every problem because it's all the same problem. You think you're separate. There is no thinker of the thoughts in your mind. That's it. That's a self you're making up.
And the witness feels like, it feels like a witness is a very good word for
Yeah.
what it feels like. It's just very silently.
Yeah. It's just a presence, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's presence. It's not a judging presence. It's not a thinking presence. It's behind all that. It's just an awareness of what's happening without having opinions on it, without having thoughts about it, without making a commentary of it. And all I have to do to feel that presence is practice looking at the insane voice talking to itself in my mind without judging it, allowing it to be what it is. Who is allowing it? Looking at it without judgment. Who's looking without judgment? That's the flip.
So
You
when
feel,
feel stuck on the fly paper,
yes, you have to do
you're
nothing.
judging yourself for judging and you're angry at someone who's totally
Exactly.
judging
Yes.
you.
Yes.
You just still yourself and
Yes, you do nothing. I like to think of it as the ego, because we have two minds. And until we come across A Course in Miracles, we just think we're the wrong mind.
mm,
Even when we think we're being holy, that's still the wrong mind. The wrong mind is just a three-ring circus, and it has thoughts and feelings and stories and sensations, and it's all just flying. It's this chaotic circus of madness. And then we notice, oh, this shouldn't be happening. I'm a course student. How do I fix this? And then what we do is we become the ringmaster of the circus. And we're like, I need to sort out these thoughts and I need to sort out these feelings and I need to sort out these stories. But the ringmaster of the circus is still the circus.
mm.
What wants to fix the ego is still ego. What wants a holier ego is still ego. What wants to fight the ego and make it better and change it and shift it around, all ego. None of that's you. And the only way for you to free yourself from your mistaken identity is to allow the three-ring circus to be exactly what it is. Can I offer no resistance? Can I not? This is completely counterintuitive. Every fiber of your being is going, I need to do something. I need to be the ringmaster. I need to sort it out. Every fiber of your being will scream, you need to do something about the darkness in your mind, the darkness of the circus. And anything you try to do will just cement you further into ego. You must do nothing. Offer complete non-resistance to it. Completely forgive the fact that you're choosing to be the ringmaster in the circus.
I
And
think that,
you
yeah.
feel a peace. You feel a peace rise in your mind. There's a different consciousness comes in when there's forgiveness. Because again, what we've done all our life is despise ourselves for choosing to be the ego. But when you forgive yourself for choosing to be the ego, there's a different consciousness rises in your mind. There's a peace, there's a stillness, there's a presence, there's a non-judgmental witness. Even as we're still choosing the madness, there is this background comes in. What is it that's not judging? What is it that's forgiving the ego madness? And that is the truth of who you are. That is the light of the world. And it is the truth of everything and everyone on the planet. It is the one holy Son of God who has never been fragmented, never separate from anything in creation, including God. And so that presence in us, that's where we are still one with God. The Holy Spirit is the memory of the oneness of heaven, the non-duality of heaven, God and his creation as one thing, one beingness, one will, non-duality. And that's the memory of it in consciousness. It's not ultimately our true self, but it is our right mind itself. And for as long as we have the delusion that we are a separate self, the Course is teaching us to be a right-minded self, this presence, instead of the wrong-minded self, the imaginary thinker of thoughts.
Beautiful. Thank you, Keith. I see no hands up. I will scroll through so that I'm sure. All right. Yes, we have one. Marie again. I will put you in focus. There you are.
Yeah, I have one question. How do you follow guidance? What's guidance for you? How do you follow guidance?
Good, yeah, good question. Let's go back to review lesson 52. I have no private thoughts, yet it is only private thoughts of which I am aware. What can these thoughts mean? They do not exist, and so they mean nothing. Yet my mind is part of creation and part of its creator. Would I not rather join the thinking of the universe than to obscure all that is really mine with my pitiful and meaningless private thoughts? The thinking of all the universe, that's what guidance is. And so when I use forgiveness, when I use the miracle to let go of identification with the insane voice talking to itself in my mind, the story of Keith, which is a story of no one, it's just a thought made identity that means nothing. When I let that go and I feel my okayness now and know that okayness that I'm experiencing myself is the truth of everyone, whether they know it or not. They may be suffering because they think they are the insane voice talking to themselves, itself in their mind, but I know they're this. So the sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for itself, for himself. If I'm not the insane voice talking to itself and I am this presence, then nobody is an insane voice talking to itself. Everyone is this presence in behind. There is this one life that is the truth in the midst of and behind the dream of separateness and fragmentation. That is our shared identity in the Holy Spirit. Now, when I have shifted my identity to there, I have no personal interests. I don't have an investment in anything happening in the world, so I can be okay. I have claimed my okayness. It is already what I am, and it's already what everyone is. And so if I hold that as my identity and I see that as the identity of everyone else that I'm interacting with, then the thinking of all the universe can express itself through me. Now that the ego interests have dissolved, now that personal separate interests have dissolved, now that I don't need the world to be any way at all for me to be happy, I have discovered what I am. I've awoken to what I am, which is happiness itself. It doesn't need anything. And so now, what is in the best interests of all the universe can the environment decides through you. The Holy Spirit, that's the truth of every parent mind, decides through you. Love can express itself through you in the most helpful, effective, intuitive, guided way possible, but you will have no investment in it for your happiness. See, if you don't know that you're happy, you're an ego. Because light and joy and peace abide in you because God put them there. And that's what we fall back into as the truth of our identity in the presence of the Holy Spirit. We let the stories go by looking at our decision to identify with them without judgment. The presence is there. That's where the happiness is. That's where there's no lack. That's where there's no need. And when I know it as the truth of myself, and I know it as the truth of everyone else, I don't mind what happens in the world. And the Holy Spirit's thinking of all the universe operates through me. The ego feels horrified by that. Our separate identity feels very cheated by that. But what I would say is that the experience will be that life just goes smoother. Not in the way you thought you wanted it to go, not at all, but it will go better. And everything, you'll see all things working together for good. Now, again, none of us, our bodies are separate selves. So Jesus was still crucified, or I should say, the image of his body was still crucified, but Jesus knew that wasn't him. Other people saw a body on a cross dying. Jesus knew he wasn't there. He's the presence that's here now in this moment. He was the one life that animates the entire dream. So I think in the Course in Miracles community, this area of guidance can go very wrong. It can go very wrong-minded. Um, you'll see so many people on the internet going, Jesus told me personally this, and they've weaponized it. It's like, well, I had a direct revelation experience, which means I'm right and you're wrong. And Jesus told me that A Course in Love was the ego. And Jesus told me that no other spirituality is as good as A Course in Miracles. And this is just the ego masquerading as the Holy Spirit. This is just the separate self pretending it's holy and in touch with something that's holy and feeling special because of its holiness. So when it comes to guidance, we do not want to think about guidance as this booming voice in our head and this 4K movie that starts up. It is not like that for anyone. It is a language of feelings. It's a language of subtlety. And it's a language of that it's almost like something that takes care of itself through surrender. And it's almost like if I know the truth of what I am and the truth of what you are, then what I say can just sort of be what's necessary in the situation or what's the most helpful or loving thing to do in the situation. But I don't have to think about it. And I don't have to second guess it afterwards. I would say if you are spirit, knowing spirit as the truth, the same spirit you are as the truth of everyone, they may not know it. So they're calling out for love because they think they're an insane voice talking to itself in a story. or they may know it and then they're expressing the love of that. But if you know what you are and you know what they are, then everything you say will be guided and intuitive. The thinking of the universe can work through you. Once personal interests are removed from the equation, because you have no personal interests because you're not a person. You are the one life. That is the truth of everyone. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you so much. Woo! Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Then we have Åsa. Welcome, Åsa.
Hi, Åsa.
Hey, thank you. I don't have a question, but I have a little short story what happened during this podcast. And I thought that I was in a hurry because I'm going to another thing right after this. So I really make sure that there was no sound and no camera on, and I had the phone in the bathroom, so I was fixing my hair, and I felt so safe in this listening in the beginning, and suddenly I felt someone is watching me, and then I thought, oh my God, the camera is on. I was doing all this thing with my hair, and this at any other moment. I would have felt so ashamed. It would have been the worst thing for me because I have this image that I'm ugly. I have to fix myself, and oh my God, if anybody sees that I'm not looking this way, this things. But in where could I be more safe than in this space? So I just turned the camera off and started to listen. And I became calmer and calmer, and now I just I just love this story. It's the most beautiful thing that could have happened to me, because when I heard what you said, this was really a bliss. I'm so grateful for this.
Perfect.
And this is a beautiful story because I guess nobody wants this to happen.
And it didn't happen to anyone.
No, I think Anna saw it the most. Yeah. I didn't happen to.
Didn't happen to anyone. The one it happened to is just a story.
Yes, it's just a story.
And you're the one that sees that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
you're peaceful. Now. Yeah. And you're peaceful always.
Yes. Yes.
Anytime we use forgiveness to slip out of identifying with the illusion of ourselves, the separate self, and feel the presence in our minds, all is well. All is well. That's why Jesus says, in my defenselessness, my safety lies, because we only defend illusions. My body, myself, my public image, my reputation, the things that we would want to defend are illusions because they're stories about no one. It's got nothing to do with you. And you're the one that sees that in the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah. The presence, the peace.
Yes, it was beautiful. Thank you so much. And thank me. Thank okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Åsa. Anyone else having a question? And I'm happy to translate. All right. So thank you so much, Keith.
Pleasure.
I feel very uplifted and clear.
Good. And that's nothing I have done. That is you feeling the truth of what you are in the Holy Spirit. If you were judging me, you wouldn't feel it.
Oh, that's true.
But if you're allowing me to say what I'm saying without arguing with it, then the light in your mind is the light of the truth of who you are.
Yeah.
Because there's no cause in the world. I can't make you feel anything. Course in Miracles can't make you feel anything. Nature, music can't make you feel anything. It's all down to, am I allowing the present moment to be? And if I am, the light of the world will illuminate my mind and make me peaceful and inspired and connected and joyful and loving. And it's got nothing to do with the music or the nature or A Course in Miracles or someone talking about it. It's the fact that when you're not judging, when you're allowing the present moment to be what it is, there's no ego there. It took me a long time to realize that, well, ultimately, ego, it's not a thing. It's not a noun. It doesn't exist all the time. People are like, oh, I don't know, I'm afraid of losing my ego. I'm afraid of waking up. But the fact is, your ego is just an idea in your mind. Your separate self, your personality is just an idea in your mind. It's just a story, and it's not there all the time. And so it constantly dissolves, and you feel peace and inspired and joy and love. And then it reformulates, and you feel pain and limitation and restriction and hatred. Um, and so, when there are things you don't have objections to, like a beautiful scene in nature, or, Beethoven's choral symphony will do it for me every time. Um, or listening to reading A Course in Miracles, or listening to someone talk in a satsang, then because you've no objections to it, because you're simply allowing it to be without objection, there's no ego there. You There is just you presence. There is just the beingness that's the truth of you. And so people fear, oh, losing my separate self, losing my ego. It's not a thing. It's a verb. It's nothing except arguments with the present moment. And when you don't argue with the present moment, you're not a separate self. You are all of the universe experiencing whatever is here now in this moment. The one life that we all are in the Holy Spirit. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why Jesus says enlightenment is, those who seek the light are covering their eyes. Enlightenment is but a recognition, not a change at all. No, you're not a separate self, and it's not there all the time. And all the happiest times in your life was when you weren't there as a person. There was just a beingness that was there because the insane voice talking to itself in your mind shut the hell up. And without thoughts, there is no separateness. Just like without thoughts, there's no past or future. It's completely made out of thoughts, and it's not true. And so, whenever there's a silence in the mind, or even just not believing it, that's enough. Then there is no ego there. There is no separateness. What you are is the light of the world. It's the truth of everyone. God's one holy innocent son.
Beautiful. I recommend to join Keith's Facebook group, and I will put a link together with sharing this video later on, so people have
Very
access.
cool. And if you're joining the Facebook group, just be sure to agree to the group rules at the time of application, or I won't let you in because they're very strict. Only because it's a very pleasant place to be, and
Very,
no
very.
unpleasantness is tolerated. So you got to agree to the group rules before you join.
And I also wanted to share with everybody, we have more speakers coming up, so one can go to ekimtillsammans.se, and our next one is Jenny Maria de la Luz, and that's March 29, also a Friday, so at noon that Friday. Lisa Anatoly is coming April 5th, and that will be 4 o'clock in the afternoon due to time difference. And then we have Sean Reagan, April 12th. And we have more coming up. I just haven't put them in the schedule yet. We have more speakers coming to this group speaking for us. Thank you so much, Keith.
Pleasure to be with you. Lovely to meet everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
You too.